ever heard of Vilfredo Pareto? No? Well, neither had I. Pareto was an Italian economist and engineer who noticed that some of the pea plants in his garden were way more productive than the others. So he counted the peas and he discovered that 20% of his plants produced 80% of the peas. And by now you're thinking, so what? But the reason this matters is that the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule, applies to almost every area of life. Yours and mine too. And it can make your life awesome.
Yes. Now think about this. Time is one resource where we're all treated equally, at least on any given day, not over an entire lifetime. But although individual lifespans vary a lot, we all have the same amount of time. Now, no one gets more time than anyone else, but we get the same 24 hours, and what are we going to do with those hours? That will truly affect the quality of our lives. The Pareto Principle helps us dramatically change things because by making a few simple shifts, we can radically improve many, many things.
All right, so in this video, we're going to give you an overview of the 80-20 principle and how to make your life better using it. And over the years, we've noticed that the concept comes up over and over and over, and it really does resonate with us as something that is tremendously important. So pay attention, at least for 20% of the time.
That's because the Pareto Principle has so many applications to our lives, whether it be our careers, our health, or our relationships. It really is everywhere, so let's jump right in.
All right, we find it interesting that something as simple as a crop of peas could lead to a major discovery, but that's exactly what happened, and Pareto began to apply his findings to all kinds of areas in life, not just plants.
Right, Pareto began to think about economics and wealth distribution as well, although that's not typically where peas take your brain. He calculated that roughly 80% of all the wealth in Italy was controlled by only 20% of the people. And this type of distribution later went on to be called a Pareto distribution. And amazingly, this principle applies universally, literally in all kinds of different ways.
Mathematicians call it a power law distribution, and it seems to hold up very well in nature and in society, that the bulk of our meaningful output, the things that we get done, come from the minority of the inputs. And no matter where we look, the principle still applies.
Right, so let's put this into language of cause and effect to help understand the concept. For many events, roughly 80% of the total effect comes from only 20% of the actual causes. In my own case, I was surprised to find out that despite having an enormous music library, I tend to listen to the same 20% of songs about 80% of the time. Isn't that weird? Nobody told me to divide my listening time this way. It just fell into the Pareto pattern all on its own.
It really is kind of an unconscious autopilot thing. And usually our inputs, the things that cause results, are some combination of either time or money. So it makes sense that we might use this insight from a brilliant Italian thinker in order to be more effective in using our own resources. After all, as Mike said, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And as my mom always taught me, money doesn't grow on trees.
Right, but if it did grow on trees, you can be sure that 80% of the money would grow on 20% of the trees, right?
That's right. And I'm 80% sure that would be the case.
And 20% of all the things your mom taught you affected 80% of your life. I mean, think about what this means to your time. People often mistake busyness for productivity, but that's not the case at all, because you can be very, very busy beyond belief, but just spinning your wheels. You can safely assume that only about 20% of what you actually do is responsible for 80% of your productivity.
Yeah, so it probably makes sense to know what those most productive things are and do them first during your day. You might find that you can eliminate a few hours of work without sacrificing much, if anything, in the way of results. But continue to take showers and tidy up your home. We're not saying that the 80-20 rule should push out neatness or personal hygiene or anything like that. It's just a way of looking at things, but in a way that can make your life a lot better.
Exactly. And think about your relationships. You probably get 80% of the fun and value from only 20% of the people you hang out with. So when it comes to making decisions on who to spend more time with or less time with, think about which relationships best meet your personal needs and act accordingly.
Yeah, it really does make sense to think about that. And amazingly, this even applies to human emotions and the state that we're in at any given moment, right?
You're right, for sure. Even though you have an amazingly wide range of possible emotions, you probably spend about 80% of your time in only 20% of those emotional states.
And if it's watching videos or recording videos, in our case like this, it's a pretty happy state for the 80% of the time that we're doing this. So it makes sense to take stock of your most common emotions and evaluate. Are they serving me? Is that what I want to feel every day? If yes, keep doing what you're doing and you'll get more of the same results.
And if not, then you'll need to make changes to how you use your body and that brain inside your head to spend more time feeling awesome. Think about it in the area of fitness. What if you identify the 20% of exercises that give you 80% of the result? If I'm in a hurry, I can do 10 minutes of push-ups and squats and get most of the benefit of a longer workout.
Yeah, that's totally true. Now, Mike, if you asked your wife to make a list of her top 10 complaints about you, do you think there might just be one or two that hold the most weight?
Well, although I'm tempted to say that she complains about everything I do wrong, it's probably only the same few all the time. She'd like me to vacuum the house more often, and she keeps wanting me to throw away my old favorite sweatshirt. But none of those things truly affect our relationship. They're small things and easy to fix if and when I get around to them.
Okay, so speaking of small things, I had a wonderful boss many years ago when I worked as an engineer. His name was Grant Pacey, and he clearly understood the Pareto Principle, because whenever he'd have team meetings with us, if someone discussed a problem that wasn't really a big deal, he'd frame it as a grain of sand. That's a grain of sand, guys, and we're moving rocks. That's what he would say.
It sounds like he was a great boss, although I'd much rather move a grain of sand than a huge rock, at least 80% of the time. He must have been a smart man.
He really was. Pareto's principle applies to many areas of life. So think about eating habits. Remember Tim Ferriss writing about this in the book, The 4-Hour Body. He said that we tend to repeat the same meals over and over throughout the week. So if you're planning to eat healthier, you really only need to swap out a few meal ideas, because it's those crappy meal ideas that you're repeating over and over that are affecting your health negatively, and all you need to do is replace them.
Oh, well, that was certainly true for me. I thought Ferriss was wrong about how we ate the same things over and over, at least until I evaluated what I ate in a week. And he was bang on. I ate the same 20% foods 80% of the time, just like he said. So I changed up the 20% and I replaced toast and donuts with eggs and sauerkraut and felt much better. Pareto's principle applies across practically any area of your life, like we said, from relationships to work to health and fitness, money, and even having fun.
In fact, we humans are pretty consistent beings. 80% of our day is probably spent doing the same core 20% activities. Same job, same people, same arguments, same wind-down ritual at the end of the day, same bedtime routine, even the same internal dialogue around our hopes and dreams. And that's what makes it so important to identify that key 20% that we need to actually concentrate on.
Right, we have a bit more variety than your pet dog and my cat, who spend most of their lives lying around sleeping, but our days are mostly filled with sameness. And as boring as that sounds, it's actually a remarkable and empowering realization, because it means that you only need to change a small number of things for everything to change in terms of what kind of life you create. Now think about that. You only need to change a few things.
We're going to come back to this concept later when it's time to make some suggestions to you towards the end of this video on how to improve those areas of your life. But for now, we'll leave you with something to consider at a high level. Just think of the big picture here.
First question, think of your life as a ship on the open water. Now, no ship is perfect, so there are holes in your ship, well, at least this hypothetical one. Each hole represents a problem. What are the biggest holes in your ship? Because the biggest holes are the biggest problems, and Pareto would tell you to focus on these first. Stick with the 20% that are most important and urgent and demanding, and you will get a powerful result.
That makes sense, because obviously you would think of 80% of the water leaking into that ship as coming from the 20% that are the biggest holes, so let's plug those first. So the second question we want you to consider right now is this. Think about all the things that you have on that metaphorical ship that's your life. What's unnecessary? What could you throw overboard and never miss? It's just a metaphor, so it's okay if you pick people who you waste your life with, or stuff that you waste money on, or even physical things that are taking up space that you really don't want to waste.
What about your finances or investments? Do you realize that about 80% of your financial security comes from 20% of stuff you're invested in? It really is that simple.
So that's the Pareto Principle in action. Begin to consider that 80-20 concept and start to notice what's out there to discover. What's the 20% of anything that you need to focus on?
And once you have identified that vital 20%, make sure that's where you put 80% of your focus, because that's when everything changes for the better.
All right, if you enjoy this video, then we want to hear your comments. So make sure you comment underneath this video and let us know, where are you going to invest more time and what areas of your life are you going to throw overboard? Relationships, recreation, finance, health, career, things like this. Apply these principles to your life and you will have a much better life. If you enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and then head on over to our website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com, where you can get a lot more awesome content. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks once again, and good night.